Vanakkam, Krishnan.
Vanakkam and namaskaram, Anand. How are you?
Namaskaram. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
So today my guest is Ramayya Krishnan. He's the W. Cooper and Ruth F. Cooper Professor of Management Science and Information Systems at the Carnegie Mellon University. He's the founding dean of the Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy and has held that position since 2009. A distinctive feature of his work has been deep partnerships with firms and government agencies and the pursuit of work that has made foundational contributions to science while making a real-world impact. He has been a serial academic entrepreneur and established multiple externally funded university-wide research centers at CMU. Krishnan was elected a AAAS Fellow, an McCombs Fellow, and a Fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. In 2019, he served as the 25th President of McCombs, and in 2022, he was appointed to the National AI Advisory Committee, which is charged with advising the President and the White House National AI Initiatives Office. He is a recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award of the IIT Madras and the University of Texas at Austin. Krishna,
Thank you.
it's a pleasure to have you here. Rombo Nandri, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Excellent. Really looking forward. And let's start with your name. What is your actual name?
Well, I go by Krishnan, and the reason for that is Ramayya is actually my father's name, and Krishnan is my given name. So everybody should call me Krishnan.
Okay. But are there more names?
Yeah, I mean, actually, my official, the name that I don't quite use, but is my quote-unquote official name is Ganapati Krishna Sharma, but I go by Krishnan.
Okay. Yeah. Much simpler, right? So I know that you studied at IIT Madras, but are you Tamilian?
Yes, I am Tamilian, and I did grow up in Madras. I was born in Gujarat, in the northwest of India, and I did study at IIT Madras. It was a wonderful institution where I did my undergraduate studies in mechanical engineering.
Indians are known to speak multiple languages. Which ones do you speak?
I speak multiple languages. I must speak multiple Indian languages. I speak Tamil, I speak Hindi, and I speak Malayalam with some mistakes. My wife is from Kerala, and they speak Malayalam there. So I speak some Malayalam as well. So those three languages I speak reasonably. I can understand some other South Indian languages like Kannada and Telugu. But the three languages I would say are Tamil, Hindi, and Malayalam.
Right. Can you read Malayalam?
I can't read Malayalam. I can read Tamil and Hindi. And Sanskrit was something that I read as a religious, it's a language for religious texts. So I can read Sanskrit, but legitimately I should only limit my knowledge to Tamil, Hindi, and Malayalam.
Yeah. So you come from a traditional South Indian family, right?
Indeed.
And what did your parents do?
My father was a civil service officer. He was actually trained as an engineer, and then he came of age right around the time India became independent in 1947. And in 1953, 54, he joined the Indian Civil Services as a police officer in the Indian Police Service, IPS, in the Gujarat cadre. That's why I was born in Gujarat, I guess, because we were in Gujarat. And my parents lived in Gujarat for about a decade, and moved to Madras, what is now called Chennai, early 60s. And there are four of us, elder brother, two sisters, and I'm the youngest. And my father was, as I mentioned, he was an engineer who went on to do the civil service exam. My mother was a homemaker, took amazing care of us and taught us great values. So I learned a lot from both my parents.
Yeah, excellent. Are they all in the US or only you?
I have two siblings in the United States and an elder brother who unfortunately has passed away.
Okay, right. Um, so you're born in the early 60s. How was life at that time in Chennai and throughout the 70s?
I think it was a really a wonderful time growing up. Um, had a lot of friends. You played in the streets. It was um, not quite as organized as the kinds of sports we have here in the United States. I mean, you played cricket. You played what's called gulli danda, which is a game that you play with sticks. So a lot of fun growing up playing in the street. But then when I went to middle school and high school, I began playing table tennis and also some soccer and hockey.
Soccer?
But I really became more oriented towards playing field hockey when I was in college, more so than when I was in school. In school, I primarily played table tennis.
Okay, that's very impressive. Were you there in India when they got the gold medal in the Olympic Games in 1980?
Yes, I was in India, and I'm quite a sports fan, so I enjoy sports. I watched cricket a lot growing up. Madras is the home to the famous Chepauk Stadium, where you have a number of great matches that have been played, and I used to watch them live with my brother, and I enjoyed that tremendously. And also a lot of field hockey matches were played in Chennai. I mean, it was called Madras when I was growing up. It now called Chennai.
Yeah.
And so 1980, India won the Olympic gold medal in the Moscow Olympics.
Yeah.
And so I certainly was in India then. Yeah.
In '83, were you there too for the
No, I had
World Cup?
just moved to the United States. I was already in Texas. Yeah.
So when India won the World Cup in '83, you're already in the U.S.
I was in the US.
That was quite huge, right?
It was. That's right. Now that you're talking about the World Cup is cricket.
Yes, cricket, of course. Yeah.
In 1980, it was the field
hockey. Yes. Because the
so
cricket is not
both favorite sports of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. So because cricket is not in the is not part of the Olympic Games, right? So
I don't believe it's in the Olympic Games unless they've introduced it recently. I think field hockey is, but not cricket. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So what about music? I know that film songs are really popular in India, but I saw somewhere that you enjoyed listening to Hotel California on the radio at IIT. And later when you went to the US, you discovered Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple. That's quite unusual.
Well, I mean, actually, growing up when I was growing up, I mean, we listened to a wide range of music. My parents were both avid listeners of classical Indian music. So this is Carnatic music and Hindustani music. So that was there. Though at that time, I wasn't that engrossed or excited about Indian classical music, though I've gotten to like it a great deal now. I listened to what is effectively pop music, which is the popular film music, both Hindi and Tamil were the two popular genres of film music that I listened to growing up. And we also had a lot of, the Bee Gees were very popular, the Beatles were very popular. There was lots of popular music, Western music. And when I went to IIT, there was a great deal of exposure to rock music. The Stones, and certainly Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and of course the Eagles. Hotel California was a huge hit in the time when I was an undergraduate at IIT. So we used to play it on we used to have, those days we have these long play records. Nobody knows what they are anymore, but we used to play these records over and over and over again. So I didn't have to wait till I went to the US to get exposed to Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. Wow. I was already exposed to it at IIT. And I actually got to watch Uriah Heep, which is another
Yes, I know.
band which I had listened to at IIT. I watched them live when I went to Austin. So
Wow. And I heard that you also enjoyed Stevie Ray Vaughan, correct?
right. I mean, Austin had an amazing club scene, and it had very good blues and the blues rock was very popular in Austin. And Stevie Ray Vaughan was a young upcoming singer then, and I was very fortunate to catch him live in on Sixth Street in Austin. I remember in the 80s. This was early 80s when I just moved to Texas. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm really impressed by your musical taste, and it's very broad. I was actually very exposed to Carnatic music when I was growing up because of my parents, especially my dad, who's really into that. But I was never able to really appreciate it, though I understand and respect the complexity, especially the rhythms, the ragas, and everything. But for me, and even for my brother, we had some difficulty to digest. So we went more towards rock and things like that. But even my cousin, Shriram, he plays the mridangam and is very knowledgeable about Carnatic music. But yeah. So regarding literature, do you have any particular style of books that you like or authors?
I mean, again, I have a fairly wide range. I mean, my bandwidth is kind of large, from popular thriller type novels to more classic literature, which I mean, English literature. Certainly, there was the classic English literature which you studied in as part of from Thomas Hardy and books Far from the Madding Crowd, things of that
P.G.
nature.
Woodhouse.
P.G. Woodhouse is more popular, but this is this is more classic English literature which you studied in school. Charles Dickens,
Yes.
Books by famous authors like that.
Mm-hmm.
Two more popular writing by English authors, P.G. Wodehouse, and also more serious philosophical like Aldous Huxley.
Yes.
And then
Brave New World, right?
And then trashy thrillers, James Hadley Chase, those kinds of.
Uh-huh.
So the whole gamut.
Yeah.
And then there's a very popular movie, a Tamil movie out right now called Ponniyin Selvan, and this was a very famous book actually by a Tamil writer called Kalki Krishnamurti, and it's a wonderful story of the great Chola king Rajaraja Chola, and it's a 5-volume book in Tamil, and that was a wonderful book. And now people who can't read the book can certainly watch the movie. It's just released and it's a huge hit. So very wide range of reading.
Absolutely.
More English than Tamil, but certainly got to read both literatures.
Yeah, that's great. There is a tremendous competition among the students to be admitted at IIT. How did you prepare for the exams, and did you receive any pressure from your family?
There was not so much pressure as in, I think very early on, I think it perhaps had to do with my father being a major role model, that the idea was that you went through these competitive exams to get access to high quality education. In my father's time, it was about getting access to high quality jobs through passing the civil service exam, which was a very competitive examination. And at my time, the idea of my wanting to apply for an IIT was probably something that, even by the time probably I was 10 or 11 years old, I recall thinking, this is what I wanted to do. So I wrote the exam relatively, I mean, as a young, I completed high school by the time I was a little after 15. So I took the exam just a little after when I was 15 years old. And my elder brother, who who had prepared for that exam, but he had all the materials for that exam at home. So I used that to prepare for that exam, and I was fortunate to do well in that exam and get admitted to the IIT. It was indeed a very competitive exam, but it was not one of those things I was pressured into doing or anything like that. It was one of those things that felt very natural for me. My dad had done the civil service exam, and I thought this was something that I would do.
Yeah. So you joined IIT when you were 16 years old?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Is it that quite common, or you were?
I was a little on the younger side. Yeah.
Okay. What made you choose the mechanical engineering degree?
It was actually totally random. I don't think it was like a deep data-driven decision. It was more like I showed up. The way it worked in those days was that based on your rank, and I had a high rank, you showed up at the local IIT, and they would tell you what branches of engineering were available and in which IITs. There were 5 IITs when I applied. So there was one in IIT Madras, there was IIT Kanpur, in IIT Kharagpur, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay. Those were the 5. And because I had a high rank and I was having that interview on day 1, everything was available. And I had gone in thinking I would either choose mechanical engineering or choose electronics engineering. And it was like a random sort of choice that I made. And mechanical engineering was very highly ranked at IIT Madras. I said, if I was going to choose mechanical, I'd choose IIT Madras. If I was going to choose electronics, I would go to IIT Kanpur. As it turned out, my wife went to IIT Kanpur the same year, but I didn't get to go to IIT Kanpur. I would have met her sooner. But I went to IIT Madras and I chose mechanical engineering. So there was no deep algorithmic thinking or model-based thinking there.
Yeah,
I just was a random choice.
That's very interesting. I mean, you are now making very complex decisions, but then when everything started, let's go random. That's nice.
No, I sort of, my reason for even choosing engineering in some sense was that my father was a chemical engineer, right?
Right.
And what appealed to me about engineering was more the engineering approach to problem solving, more so than the details of the engineering itself. It wasn't like I went in thinking I want to design something, therefore I wanted to be an engineer. It was more what was appealing to me was there was an approach to what they call the engineering mindset. I certainly thought that logical, rational, mathematical approach to problem solving is something that engineering would give you, and that was appealing to me. And so I went in there and they said, oh, do you want this or that or this? I said, okay, mechanical.
Yeah, makes sense. Some group of students develop a sort of a brotherhood while spending time together at IIT. Did that also happen to you?
Without a doubt, it's entirely a residential college. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes. I know.
And at the time when I went to IIT, each IIT had roughly 200 students. So that's all there were. There were 200. Every cohort was 200 students, and we lived in what were called hostels, which are dorms, and depending on your branch of engineering, you often were in the same hostel. So you really built deep connections with classmates. And it's a small enough cohort that you pretty much knew everybody. And everybody in your first year, everybody had the same courses. So irrespective of your branch, you were together. So you got to know one another. And I played sports, so you got to meet a lot of others. So I think it was a very formative experience for me in the sense that these were amazingly smart students, mostly male. There were very few females at that time. Now I think it's changed tremendously. I think it's great to see now that almost half the entering class now is female. But when I went to IIT, women unfortunately were in the minority. But you built very, very deep connections with your classmates, and that those relationships and connections have stayed strong, through all these years. So, in fact, even this afternoon, we had a group from IIT Madras. The alumni director I hosted them for lunch. And we have a number of faculty who are IIT Madras alumni who are at Carnegie Mellon. And so it was great to see some recent graduates who have just graduated, completed their PhDs at Stanford or wherever, and have come to CMU. And old fogies like me that graduated 35 years ago.
Yeah, it should have been great, like meeting these people, reconnecting with them. That's very nice.
Yeah,
and when did OR enter your life?
Actually, at IIT, as it turned out. So we had a required course on operations research. That was my first introduction to OR. Was actually an intro to OR course. It was a required course in my engineering major. Maybe I was in a 5-year program those days. Maybe it was in my 3rd year, if I remember correctly. And something about it really appealed to me, about using math for problem solving. And those days, you did the matrix inversion and the basics of the simplex algorithm. You did it by hand, but we didn't have tools in those days. And you needed to go to the computing center to run, in a batch job, you could run an LP if you wanted to. But what was appealing to me was learning problem formulation, more so than the algorithmic parts, learning problem formulation, which I think has stuck with me as being a part of that OR engineering mindset. Was this approach to problem solving requires you to learn how to scope a problem, formulate a problem, determine the boundaries of the problem, and identify what the objective function should be. What are we optimizing? What are the constraints? Which parts are deterministic? Which are stochastic? What do you have to predict? Which things are prescriptive? Which things are predictive? So I think all of those things were early introduction. Nobody used all these words, but early introductions to these were made in that sequence of classes. And then I decided that I actually wanted to do industrial engineering and operations research as a master's after my mechanical engineering degree, rather than do more mechanical engineering. So clearly it was an influential course because it changed the trajectory of my studies, because I then went on to actually get a master's degree in industrial engineering and operations research.
What motivated you to move to the US for higher studies?
Actually, to be honest, I think, at the time when I was at IIT, a very large number of students, out of a class of 200 students, probably 160 of us went to the US at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, so a very large number went to the US to study. And now that's changed a lot again now in India, because I think the opportunities in India have changed. But at that time, a good number of us went abroad to do graduate school. And I went to do a master's. I mean, I hadn't committed to doing a PhD. I went to do a master's. And I went and did a master's in industrial engineering and operations research. I had admissions to master's programs in India as well, but thought that this would be an opportunity to learn and study in the US. And this is something that many of the students who were a year ahead of me and 2 years ahead of me, there was very much a culture in IIT of going abroad. So,
right. In Austin, you were fortunate enough to meet a small constellation of stars in the fields of OR and management science. Could you name some of these stars and how they influenced you at the time?
Yeah, Anand, it was truly serendipitous, because when I went to Austin from IIT, I had no idea that I would meet Leon Lasden and Darwin Klingman and Bill Cooper and Fred Glover, and then have the opportunity to work with Art Jeffreyon, all of whom are giants in the field. So when I went to do my master's in the College of Engineering, Industrial Engineering and Operations Research, Leon had an appointment in industrial engineering and operations research. And he was a leading math programmer, a math programming scholar, who had done a lot of work on generalized reduced gradient methods, GRG. Was one of the things that he had a collection of algorithms called GRG2, in fact. And later on, this GRG2 would become the basis of the Excel optimizer. GRG2 became, the solver in Excel was actually the algorithm that he developed.
So he wrote part of the code then?
It was ported and made into the solver engine of Excel. So it was truly impactful what he did, because so many people began using, his solver. But when I was doing my master's, he had a project on sequential quadratic programming. And my master's thesis was on sequential quadratic programming. So it's very much methodological work, right? That's what I did. And then I switched from the industrial engineering and operations research group to the management science and information systems group. One, because I wanted a broader set of methods and applications to work with. And Professor Darwin Klingman, who was in the management science group, ran a big center called the Center for Business Decision Analysis. And I became a research assistant of his. And he had a very large project, and he, along with Professor Fred Glover, this is the Glover-Klingman pair, had done a lot of work on network algorithms and network models. And so there was the really interesting set of production distribution problems that we were using network optimization for, working with real world partners. So the work with Leon was methodological, but I knew that Leon was working with Excel to get the solver in Excel. And then I worked with Darwin and Fred Glover, and the project was with Citgo Petroleum. So I was very fortunate, even during my PhD, while I was learning modeling and methods in operations research, statistics, and of my own interest, I was also developing the equivalent of a PhD minor in computer science. Nobody told me to do it. I just was interested. I just went and did it. And Darwin and Leon and Fred were very kind, and they let me do what I wanted. But the project with Citgo Petroleum eventually became a project that Darwin Klingman led a team for the Edelman Award. And I was very fortunate to have been one of two graduate students on that the Edelman Award winning project. The other graduate student turned out to be my wife, Rema Padman.
Wow.
And that's where we met, because she was Darwin's student, and it was her thesis work was actually this production distribution optimization project.
So you got 2 awards.
You could think of it that way. But it was a great learning experience to think about how to actually use analytic methods to solve a really large scale and consequential business decision problem using operations research methods. And it was deployed at scale using information technology. This was in the mid 80s to it was 87 or 88, I think it was the Edelman Award. And Darwin was very kind to include us in the management science paper that described this work. So all of this could not have been something you could have predicted. And while we were working on Darwin's project, earlier on, in parallel, I had an opportunity to work with Bill Cooper and Abe Charnes as a research assistant on their data envelopment analysis work, which is also, again, a very consequential technique from operations research and management science. I was a very small cog in that big lab that they had, because I was basically doing runs, if you will. I was testing their DEA method on a bunch of different data sets. I wasn't developing new methodology like I had done with Leon, or done the applications like I had done with Darwin. But it was a great opportunity to work with Bill. They were all individually giants in their own right. And I was very fortunate to interact with them while I was at Texas. And all of them, Leon Lasden, Bill Cooper, Darwin Klingman, and then Fred Glover came to Texas a lot. I got to interact with and also work on these projects that really helped me understand how to work on problem-driven research. I think that was certainly a big part of what I learned. And then at that same time, this was in the mid 80s to late 80s, Arthur Jeffreyon, who was at UCLA, began work on what he called structured modeling. And he was very kind to invite graduate students like myself to come to UCLA to interact with him. And then I built a relationship with him, and he has been a mentor as well over many years. So even though I was at Texas and I got to meet and engage and interact with Art, so you got to meet Art, Fred, Darwin, Leon, and Bill. I couldn't ask for more.
That's really, really impressive. And you were very lucky, I must say.
Without a doubt. That's what I said. It's serendipitous and fortunate.
Yeah. So your PhD dissertation was about knowledge-based aids for model formulation. Can you elaborate
Correct.
more on this, please?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing, right? So the nice thing about all these wonderful people I worked with is they gave me the opportunity to work with them on projects that they led, but they gave me the space to do my own thing. And so instead of choosing to do a project, I could have done a project that they had. I was interested in creating something of my own. So, and that's where I had, over these last, those years in the PhD program, I had built knowledge in computer science, in AI. I had studied statistics so my minors were in statistics and computer science, and my major was in operations research and management science. And it was this time that expert systems were popular in the press. And I was curious about how to bring together rule-based systems and rule-based programming systems with OR-based modeling. And so knowledge-based aids for model formulation was about how could you use rule-based systems and what are called logic programs to actually help automatically formulate models of problem statements. So what this work entailed was actually, in effect, creating a very early version where you could provide in a formal language the problem that you wanted to formulate, and you would state it using a type of logic-based language. And that's where the connection with structured modeling came about. And you would write it down, and the logic program would process these statements and then develop a first cut mathematical model of that problem statement for a human modeler to look at and then improve and evaluate. So in that sense, it was a model management system to help somebody who's a human analyst work with models. That was sort of the ambitious vision for that thesis. And I must say that it was a very odd thing to do for somebody at that time to create something of their own, because I could have done a sequential quadratic programming thesis, or I could have done a network algorithms thesis, or I could have done an applied OR thesis. I just went out and did this. It turned out to be actually quite challenging to do because I was doing something that no faculty member was doing. But it actually helped me in the future because I was building many of the capabilities that were needed for what later became this interaction between OR and machine learning,
Right.
which I didn't know about. Again, I was, but it was useful to have done all of that as part of the PhD.
So you were a visionary.
I don't know about that. I was lucky.
Let's put it like that. How did you get the position at CMU? I read that you did not understand why you were hired, right?
Well, to be honest, I did have a number of offers. There was also the time in the late 80s when the intersection between expert systems and optimization was an area that was quite popular. But when at Carnegie Mellon, I was interviewing at the public policy school, and I wasn't doing anything related to public policy at that time. I was presenting work on, how logic programming, expert systems, and mathematical programming could combine. And it had nothing to do with either business or public policy. And that's why I wondered why they would want to hire me, because, but clearly the dean who hired me, Al Bloomstein, who was himself an Informs president, by the way, probably saw something in me that I wasn't seeing. And Bill Cooper, certainly, who was the founder of the school, encouraged me to go to Carnegie Mellon because of the amazing environment that Carnegie Mellon provided. So I chose Carnegie Mellon over many other alternatives that I had. And it certainly was a wonderful and correct decision, because CMU turned out to be a very good choice.
Right. So the person who hired you was definitely a visionary then.
I don't know about that. But the interesting thing was, Bill Cooper had founded the school I went to.
Uh-huh.
Al Bloomstein had been hired by Bill Cooper, and Al Bloomstein hired me.
Yeah, nice chain.
Yes.
Yeah. So what were your first activities at CMU?
I think I had this very much of a multi-disciplinary program of research. So I reached out to colleagues primarily in engineering and computer science, because that was where the most logical connections existed for me. So I would go to colleagues in computer science, Professor Newell, famous Newell Simon, Professor Alan Newell led the SOAR project. The Engineering Design Research Center at CMU was doing work on something very similar to what I had been doing, but I had been doing it on production distribution problems. They were trying to do it on engineering design problems. So there were connections there. So being able to go to these other parts of CMU to see where the connections existed helped me establish those connections for one part of my research program. And the other was that my basic training in operations research and statistics and management science, connecting it to societal problems, that happened from within the Heinz school itself. There's a Professor George Duncan, who was a noted scholar on privacy and confidentiality. And the Census Bureau had a very interesting set of problems related to what is called the data disclosure problem. And the data disclosure problem that they faced at that time was, how do you maximally make data that was public, that had been collected from the public, right? Mm-hmm. And under certain guarantees of confidentiality. So for instance, the census surveys people and collects data about, say, if you and I were citizens in the US, we provide data about our ethnicity, our income, where we live, things of that nature. So imagine you have all these census data. They would like to release data for the purposes of helping public policy analysis, but at the same time, they want to protect the confidentiality in such a way that people cannot discover Anand's salary, for instance, or Anand's income.
Mm-hmm.
So we formulated that as an optimization problem, a decision theoretic optimization problem, saying maximize maximize the data that you can disclose, subject to confidentiality constraints, and that problem was a very rich problem that lent itself to both mathematical programming models, but it had a particular structure, so we could come up with really specialized methods to address them. And we published a series of papers in management science, as well as got funding from NSF to pursue this work. So you had both kinds of activities going on in my first few years at CMU. I got an opportunity to use the methods I'd been trained with, but on new problems. I had not studied privacy and confidentiality problems at Texas, but now I got to study them here. The other was taking stuff that I was doing, but connecting it to engineering and other contexts that I had not previously connected it to while I was at Texas. So, but the methods that they were using were similar, or I learned a lot from. So in that sense, it was a very stimulating environment at CMU, where I could engage with CS and engineering school colleagues on the AI and modeling work, and then the privacy and confidentiality problems gave me an opportunity to apply my OR and statistics skills. I hope this helps you understand.
Of course, it's very interesting. Yeah. So Krishna, with the internet becoming more and more popular during the late 90s and early 2000s, many research opportunities emerged, and you took advantage of that to make very impactful research work, right?
So Anand, actually the internet, in particular the World Wide Web, is what I think you're thinking about. That happened, the big web browser, the browser that made the biggest impact, called the Mosaic browser, came out in 1993. Not even the late 90s, as early as...
Yeah, so, prior to Netscape.
And then came Netscape, then came Explorer. But there was this rapid development of technology from, say, middle 90s onwards. And yes, you're right, that fundamentally opened up a whole range of problems that were amenable to the skill set that I had. So you're right that one of the things that this naturally led to was to think about how might one study, for instance, this problem of how people make choices about which e-commerce retailer to choose from among a set of e-commerce retailers. So think of this like a choice problem, where you have a lot of features associated with a retailer. So it could be, if you want to buy something, you have a set of retailers that can sell you that good. Which retailer should you choose? And you could say, okay, it's price, it's how reliable they are, how much they charge for delivery, will they accept returns, all these kinds of features, right? So, and we also knew how people actually made those choices. So could you then use statistical techniques to try and understand how choices were made? That's on the consumer behavior side of how choices were made. And for this, you needed to collect vast amounts of data about how people were making these kinds of choices. So we compiled these, really among the earliest groups to compile lots of data about how people were making choices about consumer behavior. The second thing that was interesting was, if you wanted to create a shopping bot to help consumers, how would you create a shopping bot that took this kind of behavior into account to provide them decision support? So that was the ShopBot paper, which received had a lot of impact. And actually, some e-commerce vendors even took some of the ideas from that and incorporated it in their own technology. So I think it was a blend of being able to take the OR type tools, but combining it with a lot of data and demonstrating how you could build decision support tools that actually people could use to make the kinds of choices that they were making in an online setting. So that was the beginning. That led to a whole bunch of other studies of this sort. But that certainly was. So the internet was very kind to me. The web was very kind to me because it gave me a test bed to study a number of very interesting problems.
Yeah. You mentioned that you use the statistical tools, but in general, what type of OR methods you used in this in the research lines that you just talked about?
So I think of these as all OR tools, meaning that to me, when I think of statistical tools, decision theoretic models, it's not the traditional setup as it was an integer program and we solved it as it was a combination of choice models, hierarchical Bayesian choice models, estimation of those models, and then embedding those in an optimization-based framework to allow for individuals to make choices. So it wasn't methods oriented, it was problem oriented.
Right.
In other words, it was problem driven research for which you could use methods. So we were not pioneering new methods. We were actually breaking new ground in terms of addressing new problems. I think we were not necessarily breaking new ground in new algorithms or things of that nature with this work.
Right. Your current research interests are related to data-driven analysis and decision-making, social media and analytics, data security and privacy, incentive issues in distributed information systems, and so on. Can you talk about some of your ongoing work and your research perspectives on these topics?
So, I mean, maybe the thing, those are a collection of topics. I mean, data security and privacy has been an interest right from that Census Bureau work. But the most concrete thing I'm working on today is really on what I'm calling talent supply chains. Just like your physical supply chains, this is about workforce. At least in the US, this is a big issue, which is how do you find people with the right skills to be able to take on the jobs that are available. So you're trying to, if you think about jobs as a collection of skills and people having a set of skills, how do we match people to jobs? Okay. And if people don't have the skills, how do you then take them from, so think of this as a problem, almost like a graph path problem, where they have a set of skills. They want a job that is demanding a different set of skills. So what training do they need to pick up along the way that will allow them to acquire these skills so that their current skills plus the skills that they acquire will be sufficient to allow them to match into the skills being demanded by the job. And while doing so, you also want to account for that the training took certain amount of time, it cost certain amount of money, and by doing this training, they incurred some costs. And when they get this job, what is the wage premium that they get that might actually allow them to make an economic case for why they should follow this path versus some other path, right? So this problem is a problem that we are trying to attack by first trying to understand purely in a data-driven way what skills are declining in demand and which skills are increasing in demand by looking at longitudinal data about jobs and the skills associated with jobs and which are increasing, which are decreasing. And then looking at the individual level decision support that you can provide to individuals by telling them based on the skills that you have, what do you need to do to get from here to be ready for a job? And then who do you target for this kind of upskilling are people who are in those job markets or labor markets where the skills are declining, or the job demand for the jobs that they have are declining, so that they have an incentive to want to acquire new skills to transition to new labor markets where there is more demand, right? So what
Yeah.
I'm this problem um, has data driven aspects, it has statistical aspects, it has some optimization problems in it. But I'm giving you the high level pitch on a really interesting research
Yes,
program
fascinating.
on workforce and
Hmm.
workforce and what we're calling workforce supply chains or talent
Yeah.
supply chains. That's something that I'm currently quite interested in.
Yeah. Looking forward to reading the papers that
Yeah,
will come out of that
thank you.
research. Yeah. So tell me more about the iLab and other similar initiatives that you're responsible for at CMU.
So switching gears a little bit, I think, I've been talking about projects that I individually was involved with or have led. When I even before I became dean, one of my objectives was to create a structure, and that's where the lab or the center concept came up, where we could create an environment where you could have shared resources, data sets, test beds, things of that nature, that would allow for many individuals to work on a problem, either individually or together. So early on, we had some very interesting partnership with actually a couple of former students of mine, where we got data about large amounts of data on what are called call detail records. These are networks of who calls whom, anonymized networks of who calls whom, and these are massive graphs. And one of the interesting business contexts that arise in this setting is something called a ringback tone. So when you call, let's say I call Anand and I hear a particular song, or instead of the ring ring, I actually hear a song when I call you. So I get exposed to that song every time I call you. And the question is, do I now go ahead and purchase that song? And if you look at this graph, you can look at over time the diffusion of this ringback tone over the nodes over time. And the question that is interesting is, to what extent is the adoption of this caller ringback tone determined by social influence, because you are somebody I talk to a lot and you exert an influence on me because you adopt something, therefore I'm adopting it. Is it that? Or is it because of something called homophily, which means that you and I have shared tastes? It has nothing to do with influence, but because you and I have shared taste, I adopt something, and turns out that it's correlated with what you've adopted. But the point is that given a graph where you see this kind of diffusion happening, two forces that might be driving that diffusion, one could be social influence, the other could be homophily. And can you estimate a model that will tell you what is driving adoption? Is it social influence or is it homophily? Because if it's social influence, you want to advertise the content. For content to diffuse quickly, you want to identify who the big influencers are and get them to adopt, because then it'll quickly diffuse through the graph. If it is homophily, you want a different advertising strategy, right? So the first step to do is to figure out, is it homophily or is it influence or combination of the two? And then you ask the question, based on whether it's homophily or influence, what should be the optimal approach to get content to diffuse throughout a network? This is the work we did with large social networks, um, from a partner company. And this kind of data on the network we made available, not just to our group, but anybody who wanted access to that type of large network. And that was something that was not done usually, but lots of faculty benefited from. Not everybody wanted to study the same problem. Some people in computer science wanted to study graph structure. They wanted to look at the degrees of these nodes and characterize them and look at the structure of these graphs and compare them to the mathematical graphs and see how similar or different. Because these were examples of real graphs that existed in practice. So, but the point I'm making is, by making this kind of a data set available that everybody could use in an open kind of way, it led to innovation. And that gave me the idea that, hey, if this could work well with something like the social network data, could it also work more broadly with smart city, with smart transportation? So we did this. iLab became like a generator of lab ideas. And so that led then to the creation of the Metro 21 Research Center, which was a smart city center where we worked with Pittsburgh and the region to create smart transportation and smart city. And that led to all sorts of great outcomes with the Department of Transportation. We did something with Singapore on the Living Analytics Research Center, where Singapore was the test bed. And then PricewaterhouseCoopers came and established a digital transformation and innovation center. And now I lead a center called Block Center for Technology and Society that is a center focused on, like that workforce problem I was telling you about. How is AI affecting the future of work? How do you do AI in a responsible fashion? Those are things that we're addressing in the Block Center. But in all of these centers and labs, the idea has been that you have these trusted relationships with groups of faculty and shared resources, and people benefited by virtue of having access to this type of shared resource.
Right. So you mentioned Singapore, and it seems that in 2008, when you were there, you got a phone call that somewhat changed your life.
Indeed, like I told you, we have this research center in Singapore, and when I was coming back to Pittsburgh, the former provost, Mark Camlett, called me to say he wanted me to be interim dean because there had been a change in the leadership at the school, and that he wanted me to serve as interim dean. And this was not one of the things that I had been contemplating, but I decided, okay, CMU and the Heinz School has given so much to me that I should give something back. And so I took up the interim deanship, and then they had a national search, and in 2009 I was appointed dean.
Yeah,
that's why I call myself the accidental dean.
You have made many important contributions to your college as dean, which led, for example, to a couple of highly prestigious awards from Informs. Can you mention your most relevant achievements as dean of the Heinz College?
I mean, that's a tough question, but I think without a doubt, I think the bringing together a college that is home to two schools, a School of Information Systems and a School of Public Policy. One of the questions when the college was established was, why should information technology and public policy sit together? No, nobody asked that question today, but in 2009, this was a question that was being asked. And I think this idea of bringing together a research program that blended data science, operations research, economics, information systems, and organizational behavior faculty around these questions of people, public policy, and technology. I think that's been one of the key achievements, so that we can articulate what is so special about Heinz. So I think that is sort of and how that then takes shape in terms of the kinds of research that is done, the programs that we offer, the undergraduate programs, the graduate programs, the PhD programs. So for instance, we have a PhD program in machine learning and public policy. We have a PhD program in statistics and public policy. We have master's programs in business intelligence and data analytics, in public policy and data analytics. And the undergraduate, we have now information systems as well as a new program in decision analytics and systems. And if I ask myself, what is common across all of these things? It has to do with really us being a center of excellence at teaching systems thinking, which is really an ORMS mindset issue, which is like that problem formulation point I was making earlier, combined with teaching students about information technology and analytics. Okay. And then being able to take that systems thinking and that technology and analytics toolkit and apply it to solve real important societal problems. That's what we do at each of these levels, the PhD level, the master's level, the undergraduate level. And to do that well, you need faculty that have that breadth that I just mentioned of data science, OR, economics, IT, and OB, but all excited and engaged in different aspects of the study of the interactions between people and public policy, between public policy and technology, and between how people and technology interact, right? So if you ask me what is the mission we've been on for the last, 12 years or so, that is at its core what we've been up to. And of course, if you do it well, you get recognition. And then Informs we actually competed and won the UPS Smith Prize for the best educational program in analytics. But I'd see that as a side effect of this, the first order thing of creating a mission for the college.
This year you launched an innovative new undergraduate program on decision analytics and systems, as you mentioned. But are we close to having major degrees in analytics, not instead of only minors?
Yeah, I mean, this is at the undergraduate. Remember, we have analytics degrees at the master's level. This is at the undergraduate level because we wanted to take what we had learned at the master's level and say, can we teach that to students who are undergraduates and do so in a very innovative fashion, where we not only want to teach them systems thinking and technology and analytics, but have a lot of experiential learning built in right from day one, where they get to interact on a lot of real world problems so that they learn application as much as they learn the methods and the theory, and they are tightly connected. So in some cases, you learn the application first, even before you learn the details of the theory. In other cases, this is called, there's a particular name to this type of learning. It's almost like a helix curve. Like in some cases, you learn the methods and the theory first, then you learn the application. In other cases, you learn the application first, then you learn the method. But through this iterative process and what we're calling studio courses, you get the benefit of really learning how to apply this toolkit and solve problems.
Right.
And there's a major coming. I mean, right now there's just a minor. And with anything like this, you want to make sure you understand and debug and do everything right. So at this point, it's only going to be a minor, but eventually I hope that we would have learned enough to figure out what it takes to do the major in this area.
I'm really looking forward to witnessing that. I mean, I think we're approaching a time that we might have major degrees in analytics. I would not say it's about time. Maybe we're approaching that.
But one step at a time.
Yes.
We're going to learn and figure it and do it right.
Exactly. Yeah. What was the most difficult situation you had to face as dean?
I don't know whether there's any one situation I would say as being difficult. I think when you start out as dean, I think having the capacity to articulate what the mission of the school is. Now, if you ask me, I'll say what I just told you. I wouldn't have been able to do this, when I started. So I think learning how to explain and articulate what the mission of the school is, and to bring people along so that everybody aligns with, okay, this is what our common mission is. I think that is a major challenge that requires you to sort of learn from others and at the same time convince others about the shared journey you want people to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that is something that requires a lot of work as dean. The other, I think, is that you need to have your objective function when you're an individual faculty member is maximizing your
benefit.
Your benefit. As the dean, it's just the opposite. It's about, it's like maximizing welfare. You have to maximize create an environment that really lifts up and amplifies the work of students or faculty. And you have to be unselfish in doing that. And that, again, sometimes, it's a learning process.
Right.
And then finally, I think it's about really being, like, I see myself like the chief evangelist for the school, right? So you have to be able to advocate for the school. And in those things, sometimes there are areas where you have to learn to do a better job communicating or being more assertive, or, there are all these parts of learning to be a leader that I think, so I wouldn't say there was one thing, it's a collection of things.
Yeah, but you see the difficulties as challenges. So you like taking the best of the situation and learn from that, rather than just thinking of the negative sides. I think I see, at least this is my impression, I see yourself as a very positive person.
That's very true. Yeah. the glass is always half full with me.
That's excellent. Sometimes a leader has to make decisions that might upset someone. How do you handle this type of situation, and what strategy do you use not to let that affect your motivation?
No, I think this is something that as a leader you do have to deal with a difficult situations, sometimes difficult conversations, and I found it's best to be honest in those, and to have because I think people would rather you be honest and tell them like it is, and that served me well in terms of and having a fact-based conversation has been helpful. And sometimes you say, I wish I had been more direct in some cases. Of course, as with anything else, people are not perfect at everything everything they set out to do. But my experience has been that having difficult conversations, you're well served by being honest and being direct, and people appreciate that. So rather than trying to evade the difficult issue that needs to be discussed.
Right. Okay. So during your term as president of Informs, you led the development and implementation of the AI strategy for the society. Can you briefly comment about that?
Actually, it's a phenomenal teamwork. Pascal van Hentenrijk and Radhika Kulkarni, who is currently the president of Informs, were the co-leads of the AI strategy committee. And they worked with an amazing group of people, and it was very consultative. We consulted with people throughout the Informs community. The reason why I thought it was appropriate for Informs to create this AI strategy was that AI is a transformative technology. it's something that every country now has an AI policy. They have their, I'm sure Brazil has one, much as the US has its own. And I think it's an area that has a strong intersection with the core areas of operations research, optimization, data-driven decision making, are all areas there are lots of areas that are shared between AI and OR, and to some extent, they also have some shared roots going back to the founding of AI and the founding of OR. And in some ways, I felt that those intersections needed to be recognized. I think both communities, the AI community and the OR community, had a lot to learn from one another. And at the same time, Informs had to have an AI strategy to best determine how it can both contribute to the AI revolution happening in the United States and worldwide, and at the same time ensure that people understood the contributions by the OR community to AI, and I think you'll see, for instance, the new NSF AI centers that have been established. Pascal actually leads one of them. There's a very clear attempt by the NSF to invest in areas like optimization, as well as in application domains like supply chains, like energy, areas that our community has invested a great deal of time and effort in. So I think it is important first to take a step back and say, why did we need an AI strategy, right? And I think it had to do with the fact that this is a really important time, and AI is transformative, and that the Informs community both needed to recognize, the opportunity that this transformation represented, while gaining mind share and recognitions for the contributions that have been made to date. And at the same time, going forward, policymakers and funding agencies had to understand, the role that Informs could play. That, in a nutshell, was what was the vision. But then, how it got developed was very consultative. It was led by Pascal and Radhika. I certainly contributed to it, but it was very much a large group of people that contributed to this. And then, following that, we have run a series of field building efforts with the artificial intelligence and computer science community through the CCC, which is the computing consortium, where we have had these AI OR convenings, and we've had 2 to date. There's a third one upcoming, which has been an attempt to bring members of the AI and the OR communities together to brainstorm about what the new opportunities are, where each could benefit from the other, and where the funding agencies could invest at that nexus. So it's been a very rewarding several years. It was 2019 was when we began this effort, and then of course we went through the pandemic, and now we did one Zoom-based convening and then one in-person convening at Georgia Tech, and we have one more coming up next year. So from 2019 to 2023, it would have been a 4-year process of creating a strategy, executing on it. I also launched the Informs Journal on data science while I was president, which was part of that strategy. Galit Shumeli is the editor-in-chief of that journal. So I think there's a number of things that AI strategy called for, and I'm very pleased that the community has responded and created a number of things that are going to benefit the community as a whole.
Yeah, you certainly did an amazing work, and you were recently appointed to the National AI Advisory Committee. Tell me more about that. Are you willing to take also OR to the White House at some point?
So this is something, it's a great honor. I'm very pleased. And again, I think my service at Informs and the Informs community has helped me, actually, without a doubt, in my being appointed to this role. It's basically an advisory committee to the President of the United States and the White House Office of AI Initiatives. It's broadly organized around trustworthy AI, the kind of AI R&D that the US has to invest in, and the type of issues that have to be dealt with for international trade in AI. So it has a broad mandate around AI in society, AI in research, AI in economy, and it has an amazing group of people that I'm getting an opportunity to work with that come from industry, from academia, from unions, from foundations, and so you get all these different perspectives on AI. And while I can't say very much more about the details of what the committee is working on per se, it certainly has been a very good opportunity to represent our community in terms of the opportunities that this transformative at this point in time, where you're seeing the US think hard about what the way, how should AI be deployed in a trustworthy fashion. That there are lots of opportunities for our community. Just last week, the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the United States released the AI Bill of Rights for all citizens. And operationalizing those AI Bill of Rights, there are lots of opportunities again for our community. So, for instance, it has to do with how do you do AI in a fair and unbiased way. All of these are opportunities. Just like e-commerce represented a neat opportunity 20 years ago, I think here are some very neat opportunities, I think, for the community today.
That's very nice to hear. So Krishnan, to conclude, I want to know, what are your plans for the future?
Well, I'm looking forward to going to Informs.
But in a broad sense.
I was kidding.
Yeah.
So no, I think I feel blessed. I mean, I've had really wonderful opportunities, both at Carnegie Mellon, at Informs, and public policy, and I think that combination of things has been very rewarding, because the research that we do at Carnegie Mellon, the work via the Block Center for Technology and Society at the nexus of technology and policy, has been very rewarding. And how that then interacts with the public policy work, like the National AI Advisory Council, and then the leadership opportunities that were made possible via Informs, which I'm still actively engaged with, are all things that I'm looking forward to doing more of. And one of the things that has been really good has been the opportunity to mentor younger scholars and others in our community who are interested in these different aspects of the kinds of things that I have the capacity to contribute to.
Right. So Krishnan, it was fantastic to talk to you. I knew this was going to be a very good conversation, and I'm glad that I was right. So thank you so much, Nandri. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Anand. Great conversation. You gave me the opportunity to reminisce a little bit and look forward a little bit. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and get to know you a little better as well. And thank you for the service that you're doing for the community. I think this is pretty remarkable what you're doing. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much. I look forward to maybe seeing you in person at some time.
Yeah, likewise. I just hope we can, exchange and have a word in person. That will be certainly fantastic and great. So once again, thank you very much, Krishnan. And if you're visiting Brazil, don't forget to write me a line or give me a call. It will be our pleasure also to host you here in João Pessoa. Okay, so see you soon, hopefully, and goodbye. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.